Lesson 20, Genesis 21, Isaac and Ishmael. We'll see the young life and birth of Isaac. We know that Ishmael, when Abraham was 100 years old, how old was Ishmael again? Joe? 13 or 14, right in there. Okay? So that means that's how old Ishmael is at the birth of Isaac. Okay? So again, what a great wonder, what a great miracle. In today's day and age, if they were 190 years old, we say they're ready to die, to go in the grave almost. They'd be looking forward to going to heaven. But here, they were not at that point yet, as well as they hadn't had a child, so they were still looking forward to that too. So, chapter 21, verse 1, And the Lord visited Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did unto Sarah as he had spoken. For Sarah conceived and bare Abraham a son in his old age at the set time of which God had spoken to him. And Abraham called the name of his son that was born unto him, whom Sarah bare to him, Isaac. And Abraham circumcised his son Isaac, being 8 days old, as God had commanded him. And Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born unto him. And Sarah said, God hath made me to laugh, so that all that hear will laugh with me. And she said, Who would have said unto Abraham that Sarah should give children suck? For I have borne him a son in his old age. And the child grew and was weaned. And Abraham made a great feast the same day that Isaac was weaned. Okay? So let's take a look at a few things. Okay? For many years, God had been promising Abraham and Sarah. He visited them multiple times to remind them about the birth of a son, that a great nation would come out of him. Okay? And it gave them, well, it tested them. Okay? You might say, why did God wait so long? Why didn't he do it when they were younger? What was the point of waiting so long? It's because God was teaching them patience, but God was teaching them to trust in him. Okay? To hope in him. Sometimes we need to learn those things too. We need to wait on the Lord's plans. We need to trust in him. And as you get older, some of you may, as people get older, usually graduate from high school, maybe get into college, you get that age, and it's very common for people to say, I would like to become married. Okay? I'd like to have my own family. But sometimes we have to wait on the Lord. Sometimes those things don't happen right away. Okay? Sometimes they happen to people when they're older. So God is teaching them probably to trust in him, to have faith in him, to be, yes, have hope for that one day, but to hope in God and know that it's his plan. So that's part of what Abraham and Sarah had to realize. And also for us, and probably for Abraham and Sarah too, to see God's ways. God's ways are miraculous. They're wonderful. God's ways are higher than our ways. We don't always understand them, but to know that God can do miracles and wonders. And we see that here by giving here an old Sarah and old Abraham young child. Okay? So, now we know when the child is born, right? So, Abraham is 100, Sarah is 90. Okay? And the last time the Lord had visited Abraham, what did Sarah do? Yeah, she laughed. No, he said it was a laughter that she did in her heart. Okay? Now again, after Isaac is born, now what does the name Isaac mean? Anybody know? It's nothing fancy. It means laughter. Pretty straightforward, right? But God had commanded them to name their son Isaac, which means laughter. And now we see here in that verse, in verse 6, Sarah begins to talk about laughing again. But this is a laughter of joy. Okay? This is a laughter of happiness. Sometimes when we're filled with happiness and joy, we laugh too. And so that's how Sarah feels here. She feels happy. She's joyful. And she's filled with this laughter. And therefore, we see, she says, who would have thought all these things? And so others laugh with her too. Because obviously that's what it means. Now, Isaac is growing old. He's probably 2 or 3 years old when he's weaned. Okay, he no longer needs his mother's milk, but he can eat good solid food now. Okay, and typically that must have been a time of celebration. Now for others it was a bigger celebration. Others, obviously we know Abraham was very rich, a wealthy man of his land. So he could afford to have a very large, very lavish celebration whereas a poor man may have just a meek, humble, simple meal. But in this case, Abraham is wealthy and rich, and there's nothing wrong with that, and there's nothing wrong with having a great feast and celebration. And he invites many other people to it. Okay? So let's pick that up in verse 9. And Sarah saw the son of Hagar, the Egyptians, which she had borne unto Abraham, mocking. Wherefore she said unto Abraham, Cast out this bondwoman and her son, for the son of this bondwoman shall not be heir with my son, even with Isaac. And the thing was very grievous in Abraham's sight because of his son. And God said unto Abraham, Let it not be grievous in thy sight because of the lad and because of the bondwoman. In all that Sarah hath said unto thee, hearken unto her voice. For in Isaac shall thy seed be called. And also of the son of thy bondwoman will I make a nation, because he is thy seed. So we're going to stop there. So here we have a great feast. Okay, being prepared for this little 2 or 3-year-old, however old Isaac was. And his older brother Ishmael, who now obviously is 15 or 16 years old, he probably has a group of friends that he hangs out with. And they probably come to the feast as well. And you can imagine him making fun of Isaac over there. Look at that puny, wimpy little kid. He gets a great feast and I don't. Making all kinds of fun of him. Maybe mocking his name, the meaning of his name. Who knows what Ishmael was doing. But it was not good. Okay? It was not good. And if we would compare the two boys, we'd see some differences as well. And that's probably a reason for mockery. We know that that's easy to point out. If there's a difference between you and another person, and you want to say something mean to them, well, you pick on those differences that are between you and them, and they know that they're different. They don't like that. And that's what Ishmael was doing here too. We know from outward appearance, Ishmael was strong. Okay? Rugged body. Okay? Very fit. He was a mighty good hunter. He could take his bow and arrow, and he could go out hunting. So he was a strong and good man. From Isaac, we know he probably was weak and meager. In fact, he even lost his eyesight, we see at a young age later on, when he couldn't even see his sons, Jacob and Esau, coming in. So his body was more weak. It was smaller. He wasn't strong. Even at that young age, it could already be seen that he was going to be a scrawny person, not a strong, huge boy who would command respect. Okay? Already we could see outwardly that he's very submissive. We know later on he's willing to give in. He doesn't like to put up with it. Already with a young child, you can see, do they have the stamina to go after something, or do they give up really easily? And that's what we see here with Isaac. So those are all things that Ishmael would have picked on. But that's just looking at the outside. What we really need to look at is on the inside. On the inside, Ishmael was an ungodly man. He was an ungodly boy. He didn't care one whit about the Lord or the Lord's teachings or anything like that. Whereas we know Isaac loved the Lord. He was a good God-fearing man. Okay? He was weak, but he was a God-fearing man. Okay? He had a great love for the Lord, and he believed in what God said. So those are some things inwardly and outwardly. Okay? So it shouldn't come as a surprise that in verse 9, who first saw the mocking? Who first saw the mocking that was going on? Micah. Well, God obviously would have been the absolute first, but who on earth was the first person who saw it? Logan? Yeah, his mother. The mother. A mother is in tune with her child. She knows when her child is being made fun of or mocked, and that usually doesn't sit well with the mother. And here Sarah has the same thing. Sarah sees her child being mocked by Ishmael, and she becomes angry and upset. Okay? And what did she do? Well, she went and talked to Abraham about it and said, this is grievous. This needs to be solved. Cast out the bondwoman and her son. They won't be together. I can't stand it. He's making fun of my young child. Okay? Was Sarah being oversensitive? Was she being worrisome? We'd probably say no. Because even God comes and has to tell Abraham. Abraham doesn't want to hear it. He likes Ishmael. And he too can see that Isaac is a more weak boy. And Ishmael is going to be the strong, probably more fun boy to go hunting and fishing and do all kinds of activities with. Whereas Isaac is probably going to be one who wants to stay and spend more time with his mother. Okay? Very similar to Jacob and Esau that we see later on. But God comes and he visits Abraham and he says, you have to send him away. Listen to Sarah. She's right. These two cannot live together. So that gives Abraham even more sadness in his heart and grief because he knows what he needs to do, but he does obey the Lord. So let's look at verse 14 here. And Abraham rose up early in the morning and took bread and a bottle of water and gave it unto Hagar, putting it on her shoulder and the child, not really a child anymore, but a young man, and sent her away. And she departed and wandered in the wilderness of Beersheba. And the water was spent in the bottle, and she cast the child under one of the shrubs. Again, not a child, but really a young man, a 16-year-old, probably 15. And she went and sat her down over against him a good way off, as it were a bow shot. For she said, let me not see the death of the child. And she sat over against him and lifted up her voice and wept. So let's just take some of that there. So Abraham here packages up some food and some water. There's some people that even theorize he didn't want them to leave. He wanted to make them come back, so maybe he just filled up their water bottle just a part way full so that they would go a little ways and run out of water and they'd have to come back and, it would be settled. But that's not the case here. God is in control. Hagar and Ishmael go off into the desert. They begin a long journey, probably maybe towards Egypt or wherever it may be that Hagar originally came from. They begin that journey and they run out of water. And Ishmael, being younger, not as strong probably in this situation, he becomes weak, dehydrated. And his mother finds him a place of rest, a small bush that provides some shade, and she lays him under it in the shade, knowing full well that if her son gets no more water, he's going to die. And she herself can't bear to stand to watch her own son die, but yet she can't leave him completely alone, so she goes what they call a bow shot. The distance one could shoot an arrow that far away so that she can keep an eye on him, make sure he's safe, but at the same time she doesn't have to listen to maybe his moans and groans as he slowly takes his last breath and dies, as he dies from thirst. And there she sits against the tree, okay? And she weeps. In verse 17, and God heard the voice of the lad, and the angel of God called to Hagar out of heaven, and said unto her, what aileth thee, Hagar? Fear not, for God hath heard the voice of the lad where he is. Arise, lift up the lad, and hold him in thine hand, for I will make him a great nation. And God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water, and she went and filled the bottle with water, and gave the lad to drink. And God was with the lad, and he grew and dwelt in the wilderness, and became an archer, and he dwelt in the wilderness of Paran. And his mother took him a wife out of the land of Egypt. So they don't look for a good godly wife, but they find a wife out of Egypt. Okay? So, God here visits Hagar by speaking to her, sending an angel. Her eyes are open, and there is a well. She can go and fill up the canteen or bottle and bring it to her son Ishmael, probably go back and refill it again and bring him some more, and go back again and refill it again. And once he gets his energy back and he's rehydrated, they can go then on their way, and they head down to Egypt. Okay? So that's what happens with Ishmael and Isaac. Now, some lessons that we can take from this too is we might say, why couldn't Ishmael and Hagar stay there? I mean, isn't Ishmael a son of Abraham? Isn't he too get to be part of the church as Abraham's son? We have to say no. Okay? We have to say no here. God does not want the righteous, in this case, with the wicked. Okay? Ishmael is not a child of the promise. Okay? And he was mocking God's children. That was probably something that he did too. Oh, look at this little one. He's learning his Bible stories. What is he going to care about it when he's older? That was probably something else that we can imagine Ishmael mocking him about. But God wanted them separated. They needed to be separated and sent away. Okay? So, this is a picture of what happens in the church. When we have ungodly living in the church, we must send them away. When they won't obey God's laws and they're living in sin, unrepentantly in sin, they won't repent, then on they go, or off they go. Okay? Now, there's the other side, if we remember the parable of the wheat and the tares. At the same time, there will be ungodly living in the church. Okay? The church will be filled with God's people, but there will be ungodly, okay, who also live in the church. And it's God's work to do that separating, not necessarily our work, unless it's very obvious and they're sinning. But sometimes you might just say, well, I don't like them, or I don't like something about them, or maybe there's this. Well, that's not a reason. Okay? Maybe they don't think some ways the same as you. But we need to make sure that we leave that up to the elders and deacons. God gives the keys of the kingdom, the key to discipline to the church, not to us As individuals, we can decide who and who shouldn't not be there. Okay? But in that sense, there's that. Now you might also ask, you say, well, why didn't God just punish, Ishmael by maybe killing him? Well, we don't want Ishmael. Why save him in the desert? We have to remember, Ishmael, he will have a great nation that will come from him. And although he is a Gentile, an unrepentant and unsaved Gentile, from his line will be repentant Gentile children. Okay? We read that in the Bible later on of some names of people who were descendants of Ishmael, who were godly, who God loved, and he saved them. They're Gentiles, but they're from the line of Ishmael. So sometimes you say, well, why doesn't God just do that? Well, we don't know what God's plan is exactly all the time. It's probably good we didn't. We need to learn to trust in God. That's what Sarah and Abraham had to learn here, to trust in God. So hopefully that's something that we can do too. Okay? We don't live together with the world, but sometimes, we visit their stores. You go to Piggly Wiggly, or we go to their banks, or we do those. So we need to interact with them, but the object here is we don't live with them. They aren't our best friends, and we do everything with them. Okay? That would not be good, because we'd be influenced by them in improper ways. But also, too, like I said, you probably don't have, maybe you can't wait until you drive a car, but you know the day is coming. Right? Or maybe you can't wait until you can, hunting season opens. Those are small things. But the lessons that we can learn from here sometimes are to be patient and bigger things in life. Will I get married? Or when will this happen to me? Some couples, they don't have children, sometimes at all, or sometimes not till they're very old, kind of like Abraham and Sarah, or older. Why do we have to wait? Well, that's God's plan. We can be patient in it and trust in it and know that it's good.